Show don't tell was the very first writing rule I felt like changed my writing. I could see right in front of my face that the writing was better, stronger. So I stuck with it, of course. And all this time, 10 years, I've been using the most popular writing rule there is before I realized it was always missing something. Let me show you what I mean. This is where I started as a writer, where most of us start as little baby writers. The woman behind the counter gave her a weak, practiced smile. A man sitting to her right kept clearing his throat. Camilla was annoyed most of all by the incessant tapping of the little boy's toy on the chair. Show don't tell advice tells us this isn't cutting it, right? Don't tell the reader she's annoyed. We know this, which is why most of our writing turns into something more like this. The woman behind the counter gave her a weak, practiced smile. A man sitting to her right kept clearing his throat. Camilla winced every time the boy's toy tapped the chair, teeth clenching to keep her from snapping at him to stop while his mother sat there, doing nothing. That's definitely better, which is why the rule feels like it works for emotion. I'm watching her be annoyed instead of being told, but is that actually enough? Because yes, I know she's annoyed, but is knowing what a character feels really what we read stories for? It isn't what made me want to become a writer. I didn't fall in love with books because they informed me the characters were angry or afraid. I fell in love with books because they leave you white-knuckling the pages, wanting to yell at fictional characters, unable to actually read because there's tears getting in the way, or the ones that make you mentally cross off future baby names off your list because absolutely not. That's the kind of book I want to write. And those books are writing emotion more like this. The woman behind the counter gave her a weak, practiced smile. A man sitting to her right kept clearing his throat. And the boy. He smacked his toy against the chair over and over and over because clearly he knew she had a headache. Clearly, he was part of some elaborate plan to make her day worse. The sound rang through the waiting room. His mother just sat there, reading, of all things. She must be here to have her hearing checked. Same character, same scene, same emotion. So why does that version somehow feel different? I think the easiest way to explain it is to go to a coffee shop. Imagine you walk in, the barista barely speaks, her head is down, what you can see of her eyes are glossy, maybe she sniffles. What are you thinking? She's upset, right? Or having a bad day. We don't assume she's having a great day, basically, because we've seen the evidence. We've observed her behavior, just like we observed Camilla's. So we know what she's feeling. But are you feeling what she's feeling? No, because all we can do is observe her. That's basically what version 2 was asking us to do. Watch her be annoyed. And watching someone else's emotion isn't the same as experiencing it, which creates a problem for us writers using the standard show don't tell rule for writing emotion. I mean, even the Google AI summary, which is comprised of the collective of the internet, is telling us to write the observed emotion, the body language, the bodily effects. But observation can only get us so far, which is why we're lucky for writing fiction, because it has one advantage real life doesn't. We aren't limited to observation. We have a viewpoint character. And what can I do with a viewpoint character that I could never do with the barista? I can step inside her mind. I don't just see what she sees. I know what she's noticing, what she's thinking, what she's expecting, what she's understanding, which is more than just something observation or in her body. It's the way she's seeing any given situation. And because we're seeing the situation through her, we don't just understand the emotion. We start constructing it ourselves. The boy tapping his toy, he must be trying to make her day worse. Those aren't just thoughts. They're conclusions we've all jumped to before. That's why her annoyance starts to feel familiar. And if you're thinking, isn't this just interiority? It's close, but being inside a character's head isn't the same as seeing from inside the character. Look at what we actually had access to in the second version. She winced, she clenched her teeth, but if I remove the words, she winched, that's gotta be a thing, and she clenched her teeth, is the annoyance still coming through? The woman behind the counter gave her a weak, practiced smile. A man sitting to her right kept clearing his throat. The boy's toy tapped the chair while his mother sat there doing nothing. No, in fact, almost not at all. But this is still interiority, technically. And I would argue her noticing the mother doing nothing is actually still doing some work, which is a lovely precursor to the demonstrations I'll get to in a minute. But otherwise, it's just an observation, completely neutral. Because those reactions, the bodily functions, were carrying almost all of our understanding that she was annoyed. And we still weren't experiencing the situation the way she was. We watched how she reacted to it. And the craziest part is, if our viewpoint character is the one person whose inner world we experience, we can actually access, why would we spend that opportunity writing them like a side character, someone only observable from across the room? Because that's what viewpoint is for. Not just giving us access to a character's thoughts, giving us access to their experience. That's what people read for. And that is the thing, the missing thing that took me over a decade to see. And now that you've seen it, I think you'll see it everywhere, and you'll start wanting your writing to feel like it, which looks a bit different than what you might be used to writing. So what do you actually put on the page? How do you actually write different emotions through an experience? Let's rewrite some of mine from years ago that's a little more nuanced than the examples we've seen. So context for this scene, this is V's viewpoint, is she's someone who's supposed to be working from the other side, like a double agent of sorts. She's now reporting to the leader, who is her best friend, and who assigned her this role. He's still behaving as expected, Isadra said. For the most part, yes. V bit her lip, releasing a moment later. I mean, there is one thing. Something new? V nodded. Well, what is it he's doing? Something I've not seen yet? V swallowed, or tried to. Suddenly her mouth was dry. She could tell. She should tell her. Of course she should. Isadra was her reign, and Dalen wanted to rid them all of her. But is that truly what he meant? Perhaps he simply meant to take over, sway their people to see his truth as she does. Dalen couldn't truly want his sister gone forever, lost to the winds. Is it that bad? What's he done? Isadra stopped, putting a hand on V's shoulder. If he's done something serious, I need to know. We need to act. No. V wrapped her fingers around Isadra's forearm, eyes following them. He's just been to the East Wing often, is all. I thought perhaps he was having those gatherings again, but it was nothing. I checked myself. Now, this one is interesting because I don't actually think this is bad writing. It's actually pretty good for where I was in my writing journey, but notice where most of the emotional weight is sitting. They are doing so much work, showing us she's nervous, guilty, hesitating. We can observe that clearly, but notice something else. By the time we get to V swallowed, it almost feels like she's already finished the emotional process. She's nervous, and now we see the result. But it doesn't feel like much of that process, even though there's clearly a thread of emotional experience here, because V hasn't actually made up her mind yet, right? At first, she fully intends to tell Isadra the truth. Then she starts questioning, justifying it. Maybe this, maybe that. You see what's happening? Her guilt isn't one emotion that's already been felt. It's almost like a negotiation. So instead of asking, what does guilt look like? For rewriting this, I'm going to ask, what would it feel like to be in the middle of that negotiation? Let's rewrite it. And I'm actually going to keep everything Isadra is saying and her part the same, not because it's perfect, but because I want to more fully focus on what V is experiencing. And actually, V's dialogue can stay exactly the same too, just to show you how much is carried by the experience. Let's start here with her biting her lip and releasing it, because this is a result of an emotion that's already there. I think this moment needs what's happening through her eyes. And I want to make the point that body language is not bad. There is a time and place to add some observational reactions that can actually make them more profound and more meaningful. But right now, we don't need it. We need to know what she's experiencing internally, going into this meeting. So the biting of the lip is showing the reader she's contemplating something. What is she contemplating? Do I say it? Do I not say it? But let's write that experience out. So I think that might look more like this, because then she starts to tell her, but something stops her. And we see her swallow or try to. Right away, we're seeing what this moment feels like for her. Then we move into her negotiation with herself. But I think this could become even more experiential. Right now, these sentences read more like the conclusion she's already reached. She's already done the thinking, and now she's telling us where she landed. But in an experience like this, the conclusion usually hasn't settled yet. She's still trying to convince herself. She's still arguing with herself in real time. So instead, let's try something more like this. Of course she hadn't seen. Balin was too smart for that. And it wasn't so bad, was it? A difference of opinion. Great nations always experience adversity. It made them stronger. He only meant to take over, stop Isadra from leading them toward ruin. And the people have suffered enough under her reign. Have they not? Surely Isadra would agree, if only she saw things his way. Stop, he'd said, not kill. Those weren't the same. Were they? And here you can start to see where the negotiation really begins. The first thing she reaches for is something positive about Dalen. Of course she hadn't seen. He was too smart. Immediately she's holding him in high regard, there's admiration there. Then she starts justifying what he did. We move from thinking about who he is to why his actions make sense. From there, the scope widens. She starts considering what his actions could mean to the country, trying to convince herself that maybe this is actually for the better. It would make them all stronger. He only meant to stop her. Haven't the people suffered enough? Notice what's happening. She's not arriving at a conclusion. She's searching for a reason. She doesn't have to tell the truth. She's trying on one justification after another to see which she can live with, which surely she would even agree if only she saw things his way. And then she circles back to stop. He had said, not kill. Even here, she's trying to reduce the severity of what happens. And this is what a real guilty negotiation looks like. You downplay and you reconsider and you take a different view of certain things that people did or said. And she's just looking for more reasons she can believe everything will be okay. And this is really like more of how the process of guilt and how it gets experienced. By now, we feel trapped just like her. In fact, we might begin agreeing with her that lying is the right thing. And then, of course, Isadra interrupts her. And we can keep her dialogue exactly the same. Notice what happens in the original version. She wraps her fingers around her forearms, eyes following them. It's body language, but it isn't really connected to the negotiation we've just experienced. Not really. And I actually think this is the perfect place to bring an observational detail that is connected to it. Let's try something sort of like this. V unstuck her tongue from the roof of her mouth and shook her head. Now we can feel what that internal negotiation has done to her physically. It's left her mouth dry. That tiny physical detail becomes the aftermath of everything we just watched happen in our mind. So body language isn't just decoration anymore. It's carrying meaning. Then there's one last thing I'd change. Not about the dialogue itself, but something within it. I think she needs one final moment of justification before fully committing to the lie. She starts to speak. He's just been to the East Wing more often, is all. But before she finishes, she tells herself one last thing. He only meant to save their people. But it was nothing. I checked myself. She has to believe it one more time before she can say the lie out loud, which is where she settled in that negotiation. This is the side that won. Now let's read the final scene as a whole. He's still behaving as expected then, Isadra said, for the most part. Yes. Now is the time. If she was to do anything of honor, it would be now. I mean, there is one thing. Something new? V nodded. Well, what is it he's doing? Something I've not seen yet? Of course she hadn't seen. Balin was too smart for that. And it wasn't so bad, was it? A difference of opinion? Great nations always experience adversity. It made them stronger. He only meant to take over, stop Isadra from leading them toward ruin, and the people have suffered under her reign, have they not? Surely Isadra would agree, if only she saw things his way. Stop, he'd said, not kill. Those weren't the same. Were they? Is it that bad? What's he done? Isadra stopped, putting a hand on V's shoulder. If he's done something serious, I need to know. We need to act. No. V unstuck her tongue from the roof of her mouth and shook her head. He's just been to the East Wing often is all. I thought perhaps he was having those gatherings again. He only meant to save their people. But it was nothing. I checked myself. Now look at what's changed. V still ends up lying. She still has a dry mouth. The outcome hasn't changed. The experience has. Instead of starting with evidence that she's conflicted, we're experiencing the conflict itself. She's replaying what Dalen said, reinterpreting his words, searching for reasons this isn't really a betrayal, trying to convince herself before she convinces Asadra. That's what guilt from internal conflict feels like. Not one emotion, a negotiation. And then the dry mouth makes sense because we've already lived through everything that created it. Earlier I asked, what is the character noticing? Notice that the answer isn't always something in the room, the way it was with Camilla. Sometimes that character notices a memory, or an argument they're having with themselves, or the meaning they're assigning to what someone else said. Because the experience depends on the emotion you're writing. Camilla's attention was outward, V's attention is inward. Now, those choices don't happen because I have a checklist somewhere that says, write guilt this way. It happened because I started asking different questions. And honestly, that's pretty much what my newsletter has become. Every week-ish, I'm revising scenes for my novel exactly like this, trying different approaches, talking through why one version creates a different intentional reader experience than the other. If you'd like to watch that process while it's actively happening, there's a link below. Because I stopped asking questions like, how do I show this emotion so the reader can see it? And I started asking, what does it feel like to experience what's happening from inside this character right now? And honestly, sometimes I don't know which is the right direction. I'll write 3 versions and then I read them out loud because one of them usually feels true, which is how you know. You will feel it if you're paying attention. So let's practice feeling it. Here's a short scene I want you to practice rewriting. I'll also have it in the description so you can reference it. Marcus forced a smile. His stomach twisted as he watched his ex laughing with someone else across the room. He looked away, jaw tightening, and took a long drink from his glass. Pause the video if you want to, but instead of asking, how do I show jealousy, ask, what does someone who's jealous notice? What assumptions do they make? Where does their attention go? What suddenly becomes meaningful to this character in this moment? And if you want feedback, leave your rewrite in the comments or read through someone else's and see how many different ways one emotion can be experienced. Because that's what makes books interesting, unique, and specific. And it's hiding inside the moment we've been rushing to show evidence of. Hi, I'm Bella. I help writers understand the decisions that shape a reader's experience so they know what to put on the page, not just how writing is supposed to work. And as always, any helpful resources for doing things in this video will be linked below. And I will see you next time.